Hello and welcome to Pale Reflections, a proud member of the Duff Network where we reflect on Wildbow's most charmed work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we are back to continue our discussion of Lost for Words with chapters 1.3, 1.4, and some bonus notes on circles.
Mostly Avery content this week. It's the Avery
Yes. Week. It was Avery and then Avery again, which I laughed at when I read that. Because it was very much just Wildbow saying, no, there's no format, I'll just do what I want and you can fuck off.
Yeah, I was wondering if we were going to have any sort of pattern, but there's still a chance there could be. But I think Wildbow is the kind of author where he's going to do what he thinks is right for each part, not try and formulate the story to a pattern, which is the right call.
Or with only in Avery's head from now on, and we never go back into Lucy and Verona's head. what a move that would be.
He tricked us. I did get a laugh as well out of like Avery again. Like it had such Avery energy. Like it was just this sort of, oh, sorry, you have to deal with me again.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so let's start with 1.3, which is begins with the trio, the three. We don't have a good name for them.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
The Kenneteers.
Yeah, okay, sure. It begins with these three young women driving towards the woods for the weekend with Matthew, Edith, and Charles in tow. They are headed to the lair of the Carmine Beast.
Yeah, and this is jumping ahead a little bit, but I just love how cool the idea is of it just takes a day to get there. And
yes, isn't that awesome?
There's sort of rules, like it's a bit of a ritual in exactly how you get there, but it's not a specific place. You're trying to get to some sort of alternate world, and the way you do that is through just sort of wandering away, very specifically for a day. It's so cool because it's so not non-specific and yet also very specific at the same time.
Yes, it's interesting. Something that we're playing with in this story seems to be the kind of like fluidity and abstractness of some of these rituals and magical systems. Things just seem to be very interpretive in a cool way, even more so than, well, never mind, but they just are very interpretive.
Yeah, it's very like, it's not strict rules or anything, you're right. It's very like the thought that counts type stuff. It's very magical. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we're in Avery's head for these two chapters, and we got a bit of characterization of Avery last chapter when she gave her little speech at the Awakening. But I think we see even more here, just how kind of internalized her loneliness is over the course of these two chapters, right?
Yeah.
She's genuinely very, very happy that she has found a group of people that she can go along with, and a lot of her thoughts, at least in the first half of this first chapter, are like, how can I not fuck this up, basically.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's sad. I don't know. She's the kind of character that I feel for very heavily, and I really don't want anything bad to happen to her. And actually, as we dive into more about her kind of backstory, it feels like there's more to it, in the sense that I feel like we're going to find out that there's something magical involved in what happened to her, in what happened to her, in the sense of, you know, she basically started to slip away from the world, right? Like, I think there's something more magical in that than what we see initially.
I mean, there could be. You can't rule it out. I don't know if I'm ready to jump to assuming there was magic in getting her to where she was. I mean, obviously there was Miss involved in getting her connected to like Verona and Lucy. But that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
She definitely, I agree with you. I'm very scared. She feels very vulnerable to being manipulated by someone who's nice to her and promises to like be her friend or more. Like, you know, this sort of chapter opens with her going through this whole thing of like, you know, this isn't perfect, but I mean, she's basically like, I have friends now and there's magic.
Yeah.
And that's cool too. But like, I got the impression that she was more like, oh my God, I'm part of like a crew. And I mean, it's that obvious to us. I'm sure there are some others who might pick up on it, because the other half of this sort of internal monologue is, this is good, but it would be even better if I had like, you know, someone to cuddle with. Like, she still wants, she's still a bit of a third wheel in this group, even if she's, you know, that's going away a bit. But yeah, like I don't know. Like, I'm worried that somebody's going to come up and be like, oh, I'll be with you forever if you just do blah blah blah, and it all goes to shit or something.
Yeah, or not I'll be with you forever, but who is it, Miss Hardy or something?
Yeah, promise her someone else.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe this is just the human condition, and it's not especially bad for these three. But the reason that the practice is so insidious in my mind is it's this promise of it can fulfill the things that you want, and obviously humans just inherently have things that they wish they could have, or that they wish were different, that they can't really change. And these three girls, just being teenagers, have that to a much larger extent, and that it makes it feel like they are so vulnerable to that kind of manipulation.
Especially, like, as the About page says, all these practices have costs of some kind.
Yeah.
It just may not be obvious to you. And, I mean, as we all know, teenagers are very good long-term planners, strategists. Like, they're not going to just think short-term. Yeah, I mean, they're ripe for being controlled. And that's why we think Miss picked them, really. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I think maybe we'll touch on this later, but obviously a big thing that starts to come up at the end of 1.4 is Avery seems to be beginning to specialize in doing stuff with these connections between people and between things. And you're right, it's very interesting how she was seemingly someone who was like slipping through the cracks, as you said. She was someone who didn't have many connections for a long period, and now they're kind of her forte. So I wonder, I'm interested to see where that thread goes. I guess I don't know what I'm doing with it yet, but it seems interesting that the person who was so isolated is becoming the person who's good at controlling that stuff. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Like, is she going to abuse it?
Is she going to abuse it? Exactly, is totally the question that you would ask.
Yeah, so I guess we'll see.
Yeah, it's worrying. Who knows? Yeah. So I want to talk about this chocolate bit, right? The chocolate bar, of course. We're only 3 chapters in, and we get our own chocolate bar.
Yeah. Wait.
Conspiracy.
Sorry. Before we go there.
Oh, sure. Before we dive down the chocolate bar rabbit hole.
I also wanted to pull out this one bit. So Lucy has a comment where she sort of says she's trying to finish all their notes, and she says, I don't like leaving things unfinished, and that's why she really wants to finish these notes off. And I know, we've kind of gone on about how Lucy's the mission-focused one, and we're probably going to do a bit more of that in this episode. But, I mean, it seems pretty clear, especially based on this quote, like, she 100% means to solve this case. And I think it's going to very much upset her if anyone suggests that they're not going to. And
which we don't know about Verona, but Avery definitely starts to get the vibe that they're not going to be able to solve this case.
Yeah, well, and again, like, most of the others didn't really, like Matthew and stuff don't seem to really give a shit if they actually do. Like, that was a thing in the earlier chapters. It was like, just look into it. We just need you so that we can say somebody's looking into it. Lucy seems very dead set on actually solving it. I wonder if that's going to be something where we're like, oh, okay, this is going to lead to conflict if Lucy keeps pushing.
Yeah, and I can even see Lucy kind of tying herself to solving it a bit in a way that negatively impacts her identity. Like, not necessarily that she'll make an oath saying, yes, I'm going to solve this case, but that the fact that she's going to invest so much energy into it kind of forces her to continue to solve it just by that being the expectation that people have for her.
Yeah. Well, and what does she do after they've done it? Like, if they do,
exactly.
I mean, that may not really be something that's within the scope of this story, but somebody might bring up at some point, if we do solve this, or if we have to give up, like, then what's your purpose, I suppose?
Yeah.
If they're being blunt. I mean, because the other thing, like, that had me worried is, like, Lucy, they meet at the end of this chapter, these fucking 3 roles, these incredibly powerful beings, and Lucy's just sort of going, she's like, now, I don't mean to offend you, but I'm going to be blunt. Like, did you do it?
You have a hand in it, yeah.
And it works in this chapter, so, like, it should be fine, but, like, I'm concerned that, it's the first signs of her maybe not being someone who's going to respect the boundaries and limits to solve the case.
I mean, again, we're bouncing around our notes a bit, but there's a conversation later with Charles where he basically explicitly says, he lists every single one of the named others we have, and lists the ways that they could like break loose and feasibly want to kill these three girls, and like it could very realistically happen. So there's like, if Luce offends the wrong person, or not person, the wrong being, things could go very bad very easily.
Yeah, oh, and I'm more worried about her, bending the rules to any degree. Like, you know, not so that she becomes forsworn or anything, but so that she, as you said, just pisses someone off. Like, she's already feeling like, you know, that cop who will do whatever they can to solve the case. You know, fuck the rules. They're a thorn in the police chief's side. I don't know who the police chief is in this metaphor. Maybe Miss
Charles. Miss. Yeah,
it's definitely not Charles.
Charles has the vibe of like a beaten down police chief. It's like, I don't want you guys to be solving crimes anymore. Just get out of here.
Yeah, he's the Scully from Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, okay, so go back to the car trip. We are getting a bit off track, as you said.
There's so many. That's the thing about this story, though, is it's all threads to chase, right?
Yes, it's very hard to tackle it chronologically. The last thing I wanted to sort of say on this opening car bit is I love how well the Kenneteers are already starting to be characterized by the way they're sitting. Like, again, it's sort of the way Wildbow works characterization so strongly into everything. Avery is sort of sitting there nervously holding onto her hat for dear life while she ruminates on things. Verona is, you know, throwing her hat around and experimenting. And Lucy's scribbling notes related to the thing. Like, already, it's just reinforcing these impressions we have of where each Kenneteer is at.
Yeah, what their kind of focus is. Yeah, it's great. It gives us such a strong core pillar for each of the three, which really helps us kind of define the way they're going to be interacting in situations.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the chocolate bar conspiracy, Elliot.
I wasn't sure if I was making it up.
No, it must, because, okay, I read 1.3. Okay, so let's do the backstory for people who don't know, right? In Ward, there was one specific scene, which is the previous one. There was one specific scene with a chocolate bar, and Matt, one of the hosts of We've Got Ward, dove into it. It was Matt, right? Who dove into it and built up this big conspiracy about this chocolate bar being very important. And nothing, I don't think, ever happened with it. I think another reference was made to it much later, but nothing really ever happened with it.
Yeah, I guess, like, spoilers, it was nothing.
It was nothing, yeah. But now this is, like, clearly a riff on that, right? Like, Wildbow's clearly having fun with the audience here.
Yeah, because you're right. Like, I was almost like, this chocolate bar came up like 2 or 3 times, and I was like,
yeah,
okay, am I doing a Matt? Like,
no, it's clearly something. And then it even, like, it's this kind of central thematic through line through this first chapter where the chocolate bar kind of represents Verona's, I don't know, impulsiveness / natural talent at the practice, and Luce's being a bit more like careful. And then it comes back in the next chapter as well. Like, I thought it was like, okay, that was a cool little bit, but no, it comes back in the next chapter as well. And so there's this other chocolate bar that is now hidden in Avery's room that is going to maybe play into something. I don't know. I mean, it just is like insane that this happened.
It just comes up a bunch of times, and it's so hotly contested. Like, I think that's every mention of the chocolate bar is essentially people quibbling over who gets to have it. Like, it's just yeah. I don't think there's. I agree. My best read on it is that it is just Wildbow fucking with us. Maybe it'll come back, but like, yeah, I just think it's something that Wildbow knew a lot of the audience might like latch onto, and he's just having fun with us. But it could be something.
It's a classic chocolate bar meme. No, but the thing about the chocolate bar is obviously it kind of represents to me this impulsive oath that Verona makes around the chocolate bar. Kind of represents her, like, she gets it, but she still makes bad decisions. It kind of reminds me of this idea of Verona being this character who gets it on an instinctual level enough that she can push the boundaries and be impulsive, but it just kind of works out because she has this inherent knowledge of where the boundaries of what she should do are.
She's definitely like riding a high of a bit of a natural talent right now. Like, and
yes,
and like, I mean, her whole thing that she goes on about here is The way that they're understanding that this works is that, you know, if you do something, it becomes a pattern, and then if you keep doing it, a pattern becomes an expectation, and
Yeah.
you know, you're smoothing the grooves of reality, and it makes something easier to do. That's
Yeah.
really cool. And so she's like, I'm going to keep taking minor risks, and that way, you know, it gets easier for me to take minor risks. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, but like, where are you going to draw the line? And like, you know, all you need is one minor risk
One
that it
slip
turns
up.
out
Yeah.
isn't that minor, and you've fucked something up. And that's very easy to do when one small lie can cause you to become like Charles.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I agree. I think Lucy frames it as like, that was really smart, but really, really dumb. And I thought that was
Mm.
just the perfect way of encapsulating what Verona did. It was like, okay, that's working, and you're very clever for figuring it out very quickly. But like, you know, you're gonna crash and burn if you're not careful.
Yeah. She also pulls this hat trick, right? Which is another example of this, of her basically trying to start to define herself by she does the impulsive things and they kind of work out.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really clever too. I mean, like, you know, going from the T crosses stuff out to the straight line radiates to thinking, oh,
Mm.
well, if I make a little boomerang symbol, maybe it'll come back to me.
Yeah.
It's very clever, and she added that whole unnecessary risk thing, and it does work out. And it's just kind of like, I don't know if she should be getting rewarded for this sort of behavior, but I guess this is how this world works, and I'm very concerned.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the other thing that's really interesting here is like thinking about. I'm uncertain, but I definitely had the impression after the awakening ceremony that the three Kenneteers' power is somewhat intertwined. Like, if one
Yeah.
of them is hurting, I assume it's going to affect the other two.
Yeah.
Which leads into this whole thing of like, if Verona wanted to say something like, "You will go and get me a chocolate bar as soon as you can,"
Mm.
they're kind of obligated to do it, because then it hurts them if she ends up
Yeah. If she
forsworn as
gets
well.
forsworn, yeah,
Like,
exactly.
never mind the fact that she's just their friend and they don't want her forsworn.
It's a wild play to make, to kind of throw yourself on this forsworn dagger to hurt the other two, but it could be done.
Yeah, I don't know, like, because that's the boundary Verona feels like she's already pushing up against with this. I will
Yeah.
not answer any more questions until you give me the chocolate bar. I mean, you know, Lucy started it. It was kind of a dick move to kick it away. Whatever. Like, I don't want to get caught in the petty 13-year-old squabbles, but like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a concerning precedent to start making.
No, I agree with you 100%. It feels like we're starting to see the weaknesses. There are clear strengths that come from the fact that they awaken together, but we're starting to see some of the weaknesses as well take shape.
That's a perfect lead into the next quote I wanted to pull, which is
Yeah.
one of the things they get told is triangles can impart more force on the rest of the world because they point outwards, but they also have points of weakness and points of strength,
Mm.
and they could thus collapse, especially if the diagram was imbalanced. I mean, we have three who are part of this like trio. You know, the Kenneteers. There's three of them. I find it very hard not to believe that's some sort of metaphor for the structure of them as a trio.
Yeah, especially if the diagram was imbalanced part, right?
Yes.
Like there's been a lot of conversation about the idea of the balance being maintained between these three, and this feels like it's explicitly saying, again, if it's imbalanced, they're fucked.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, whenever I'm seeing comments on triangles, I'm thinking, well, we have a trio of practitioners here. Like, so yes, very interested to see. You know, they're pointing outwards with their strengths, but they've also got weak
Where are their
areas.
weaknesses? Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, definitely. Then they're so Lucy's taking notes. Obviously, the notes that we saw in the previous part, the supplemental material.
Yep.
The something that Avery says about Miss is it just feels like she can't help but keep a lot of cards up her sleeve. And it's interesting to me that obviously not just Lucy, who we saw in the previous part, but also Avery and possibly Verona as well, are all starting to suspect Miss quite heavily. I don't know. I don't see it. You know, like she doesn't seem the type. I still think Charles is my number one suspect. Although these two chapters do a lot to try and disabuse me of that notion.
Yes, I'm sure we'll touch on that a bit later. But I mean, you know, this line about how Miss can't help but keep a lot of cards up her sleeve. It's like she literally has a hidden face and I believe hidden hands.
Yeah.
hiding things kind of seems like her deal. At least on a physical level, I wouldn't be surprised to learn it does extend beyond just that, based on what we've seen of the world already. So I don't know. There's going to be something up with Miss. I agree, she's not the top of my list of suspects who actually done it. But like, there's going to be something there. Like, she's going to have some thing going on.
Yeah, I suspect every one of our suspects has something going on, right?
That's a very good point. That's not going to be exclusive to Miss. There's going to be something about all the characters in this town.
Yeah.
So I guess the last thing to talk about on this drive to the slumber party is we learn like a lot about the practice too, kind of by the Kenneteers talking about it to each other after they've had this lesson. So Verona, as we sort of touched on already, is framing it as this kind of performance built around expectations. In particular, she's latched onto this thing where if you do it confidently, it's more likely to work. Like, her hat doesn't actually come back to her until she's like, I can't remember exactly what she says, but she's like, "Come on, hat, come back to me," and then it like does. And if you keep doing things, they're going to get easier. Like, I guess maybe that's why it's called the practice. But the interesting thing is all this seems to be adjudicated by these things called spirits, and this is kind of split out throughout the two chapters here, but we learn a bit more about these spirits, which seem to be like omnipresent everywhere. And I think the example that's given by Edith is like a twig has spirits of wood, spirits of brown, of life, of nature. So it's kind of like it's not even just physical properties,
concept,
but every concept or meaning you could put into it. Like, these sorts of spirits exist. So I don't know if there's like infinite or like how exactly it works. Like, it seems like something that's not quantifiable because it's magical.
Yeah, and these spirits are probably stronger or weaker based on the kind of expectation and belief that exists on the thing,
Yeah, and so it seems like practitioners work by interacting with the spirits. Like, that's what we start to see here. So the runes and stuff are interacting with wind spirits or whatever.
I don't know if all practice is interacting with these spirits, but maybe spirits are kind of like this fundamental force. We see other things like Avery grabs at one of the bands that she can see with her sight and is able to use those.
Right,
Are they spirits? Maybe they're like a type of spirit that manifests connections, or like dealing with others. Are others just like collections of spirits? That seems to be kind of what Edith is, as an example, but not necessarily what like Toad Swallow is.
Right. Yeah.
So they maybe are like the atomic molecules of the practical world.
Yeah, I agree. To your point, yeah, you're probably right that maybe not every practice is explicitly with spirits, like, because we don't quite know what the boundaries of them are yet, but it's definitely like some of them do. Like these like diagrams that they're drawing, that's definitely like talking with the spirits. And Avery's theatrics, like they do mention as well, I actually think it was in 1.2, that the spirits are the ones who decide when someone's forsworn. Like, they're the ones who are listening to everything. So, they are, to some degree, this sort of omnipresent thing.
Audience, and
they represent everything. Like, Matthew talks about how back when he was a Heartless, he interacted with spirits of life and spirits of death. So there's definitely a lot of people who are practitioners who probably deal exclusively with certain groups of spirits or something.
So we're learning a lot about the world, and the three girls are kind of chit-chatting about this stuff on the car drive until they eventually arrive at the campsite where they're going to sleep for the night before they continue their journey.
So the tone of this camp, in my opinion, sends exactly the wrong vibe to the Kenneteers about like what this is. Particularly Verona, because she's just like, oh, this was my first camping night, and I had a blast, and it's just like, you're going to visit, the magical Supreme Court because you're now detectives, like,
but find the fun where you can. I think if you're forced to be, you're tricked into, not tricked, but you kind of manipulated into becoming a 13-year-old witch, you might as well find the fun where you can.
I mean, look, I would agree, except I was already concerned that these three were not taking it seriously enough, and I don't think this was helping.
Yes, definitely. It's not some super fun sleep out. You're right. They are going to interact with what seems to be analogous to one of the four horsemen of the area, basically.
I mean, yeah, exactly. So I agree. If they knew what they were doing, then sure, go find the fun and stuff. But
Yeah.
at this point, I was like, and we see when Avery meets them, she's like, "Oh, we are so fucking out of our depth,"
Yes.
and I
We
was just like,
finally
"Yes,
start to
finally."
see, yeah. They're starting to comprehend just how apt Charles's warnings were.
Yeah.
Basically. Yeah, and we get Avery. We get a description of what Avery's sight looks like. Actually, so we got Lucy's sight last time. We got Avery's sight this time, which is kind of these bands. And putting that together, you can kind of tell that the banner art seems to be, just them when they're using their sight. So Lucy's banner art seems to have pictures of swords everywhere. Avery's has these like ribbons basically tied around things. And Verona's is just kind of dark, which she said that she can see in the dark, so that kind of makes sense. I'm not fully sure. We'll probably see through her sight soon, and we can put something more concrete there. But it seems to be something about like light and darkness and shadows.
Yeah, I mean, all we know about her so far is that she can use it to sort of see in the dark.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll get more next time we're in her head, assuming you're wrong about your theory that the rest of the story is Avery, but
it's not a serious theory, but if it pans out, I'll be impressed.
Yeah, but so Lucy's did have ribbons actually, or she called them sashes, but it was like, yeah,
right.
There were swords and daggers everywhere.
Yes,
and then there were sashes coming out of them that were pointing in different directions. So
right, okay.
In retrospect, I assume those might be just like a different interpretation of how Avery
of
sees
the connections
these.
that Avery is seeing.
Yeah, Avery's sight seems to focus more on them, and then she's got like these paw prints of and handprints of blood everywhere. That like the only thing I've noticed about them.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, the only thing I've noticed about them is there are more of them like in places that seem healthier is all that she sort of says. Like where there aren't handprints, she says it's like bark is peeling or there's dead grass. So there's some sort of representation of like how healthy an area is.
Or of life maybe, or like the energy that's there. It's kind of hard to tell.
Are they the equivalent of what Lucy was seeing in the daggers, or maybe the opposite? Maybe Lucy sees daggers wherever there's death, and Avery sees like paw prints and handprints wherever there's life. Or I don't know. I don't feel like I have a strong grasp on what these things are. The only thing I'm confident about is the ribbons and sashes seem to be these connections.
Yeah. It's weird. I wonder how much these images of the site are influenced by the fact that there's just been a major death of the Carmine Beast right before they awaken, right? Like
totally,
the death and violence imagery, is that just because the world is kind of healing now or while they awakened? Is that what's kind of happening, or is this just what everyone's from sight looks like? I don't know.
Well, because both of them place a heavy emphasis on red. Like Lucy says, there's red blood around all the swords. The handprints and stuff are red in Avery's perspective. Like I agree. There's a high probability that a lot of this has to do with just the Carmine Beast's death, since it's associated with red.
The imbalance that exists around Kennet now.
Yeah, this might be the spiritual scarring that has happened to the area based on the Carmine Beast's death. Like it should be more unilaterally distributed, but it's kind of all splotchy now.
Yeah.
Guess we'll see.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. We learn a bit more about Matthew and Edith here. There's this cool bit where Edith is teaching them more about symbols, sigils, circles. And she gets a stick to draw with, but instead of just picking up a stick, she grabs one from inside an open fire. So she just reaches into the fire and pulls out a stick to draw with, which is just so great. And we learn like what she is after this, but it's just such a beat of like, I mean, yeah, if you're a fire beast, monster thing, you kind of would do this, right? You would just kind of take sticks from inside a fire to draw with. Like, why not? Great.
I mean, for all we know, from her perspective, that's probably better because, like, maybe by sticking her hand in the fire, that's actually good for her. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, she has more control over the stick if it's like being cooked recently.
Yeah, exactly. Either way, you're right. It's just a fun little like extra detail on how she works.
Yeah, definitely. So we learn more about Matthew and Edith. We learn the backstory. Matthew kind of has this darkness Chekhov's gun that I'm expecting to go off at some point, or maybe not go off necessarily, but just be a thing that kind of shadows and colors interactions with him. I can imagine there being some tension between, Verona and Matthew at some point, and obviously the tension is built up by the fact that there might be this like doom demon thing inside him that just pops out at some point.
I mean, the way he calls it like a doom inside of him definitely sets it up as something that's to be worried about, rather than just like, oh yeah, I have this little darkness inside me. It's like, no, it's a doom.
Not in the least because it seems to be obsessed with killing Edith as well, which is like a classic tragedy setup, right? Like, well, this could go very wrong very easily.
I was interested to know, like, is it like wanting to kill her still, or is it like him? Like, I maybe got the impression that like he talks about how now everything he does is colored by this doom. And so maybe it's just turned on him, and maybe he sort of has like suicidal tendencies now or something. I now am wishing I had gone back and read the bit where he kissed Louise and sort of took her pain, because he says everything he does is tainted by this doom. So
was there some darkness there too?
Yeah. Well, maybe that was why it was such a like terrible experience for Louise, even though like it was healing her.
Yeah, interesting. Could be. We'll have to see. I feel like we're still in the phase of the story where we're setting up just like the things to be worried about with each character, and we'll see them start to pay off as we get further in.
No, it's still Arc 1. We're still putting pieces on the board a little bit. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I found the way that Edith's story was told quite interesting to me, because she's a spirit that's took over someone's body, right? Like, that's what she is, and there's no good way to do that. But the best possible, like the most ethical way to do that is find someone who's brain dead and bring them back and give them some semblance of life and reunite them with their family, right? Which is basically what Edith has done. Which is like, if you had to try and have a monster that inhabited people's bodies and make it as nice as you possibly could, that's what you would do, right? Similarly, Charles is this like forsworn practitioner, but the way he got forsworn was, someone needled him in an argument where he was making what seems like a fairly nice and liberal and justifiable point, and they just kind of forced him to argue the point until he accidentally got slightly too heated and made someone take one step backwards, and that's what let him get forsworn. Like, these things are like almost to an extreme extent the nicest possible versions of what their stories could be, which either means they're lying or Wildbow's intentionally setting them up as like, these are monsters, yes, but they're nice.
I mean, Charles has the I can lie shroud over him all the time for me.
But Matthew and Edith kind of back up his story in the right ways that mean this seems to be, at least here, telling the truth.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'd love to hear the other guy's side. I'm sure I'm more than willing to believe Charles was, not that bad based on the story he tells, but maybe he wasn't quite as innocent and angelic as he makes out, like he might be moving the details a little bit more in his favor as he retells the story. Like, I think that would be the human thing to do. I do want to touch on all the Edith stuff though as well, because that's like, as you said, it's kind of fascinating. So first of all, it's not just that she replaced this girl Edith when she sort of took over the body, but it's like there's bits of Edith in her. It's like the fire spirit merged with Edith, which is really interesting.
It's interesting as well that Edith is still in there, and kind of, I think what she says is enjoys the time that they spend with her family. Like, she's kind of given original Edith back the ability to interact with her family sometimes. Yeah,
so it's like, maybe she's 10% Edith or whatever. Like, I don't know if it's something you want to try and quantify, but there's a piece of Edith in her, which is like, it seems like the spirit is running the show, but there's enough of Edith that it matters. But the dynamic between Matthew and Edith is also very interesting. Like, Avery takes note of the fact that Matthew is kind of dominating the conversation, and Edith just gets to chime in every now and then. which Avery seems to tie to what I assume is an unhealthy relationship in her own family.
Yeah.
But like, what it made me do is focus in on like how Matthew sort of found this spirit back when it was just, this sort of ghost of various fire related things. And he sort of says, I talked to her for hours sometimes, trying to bring out the responses that helped her take a more human shape. And I might be being unfair here, but when you're looking through that of the lens of, is Matthew secretly like controlling or whatever, I couldn't help but notice like he's found something that's barely human and didn't have many responses, whatever that means, and he's kind of shaped it into something that he's now fallen in love with and married. Like
he's infused it into his perfect woman.
Yeah, like there's. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying 100% that's how like it's meant to be read, but like you can take that reading away if you're trying
definitely.
to. The sort of other side to all this is Edith seems to be getting happier the further away they get from civilization, which I don't know how much that's just her being a spirit, as I think it's Lucy suggests.
Yeah.
But like Edith mentions right at the start that she is and she was fleeting, and I wonder if like she's forcing herself to stay together for Matthew, like, and that could be because she feels guilt that he has the doom or whatever. But like, I wonder if it's more just she's going against her nature to be with him for whatever reason, and that just makes her miserable on some level. Like, I mean, that's good storytelling, like the head and the heart, like going against each other. That's George R. R. Martin's old thing. So, like, it makes me more interested. But I think Avery's right. There's maybe some angle to this relationship that we're not seeing. That's maybe not as wholesome as their relationship seems to be.
Yeah, I mean the power dynamic between a practitioner in air quotes and an other who are married, I mean there has to be weird parts that are just inherent to that power dynamic. So even in a perfect situation, there would be some things that just would be weird and awkward interactions.
Yeah.
You're right. There's more going on here. I don't know if it's enough for me to put Matthew fully onto the suspect list, which right now is just Charles.
Yeah, okay. Well, actually, let's talk about Charles as well, because right after meeting Matthew and Edith more deeply, we get more details on Charles.
Yep.
As you said, again, there's always that shroud of he can lie.
He can lie. He's the only character so far who can lie, apart from whatever the person's name who the interlude was from.
Louise, yeah.
Louise, that's it.
But, like, so Charles basically frames a lot of it as he's like, oh, everyone is inclined to hate me and not take me seriously or whatever because I have bad karma.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, like, all three, like, we've seen Charles from all three of the Kenneteers' perspectives, and he's right. All three of them have totally roasted him in their like descriptions of him. Like, we've gotten axe murderer, homeless.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even a super consistent description of why he's bad. It's just they all seem to find reasons to think he's shit. It makes me believe that there's some truth to what he's saying. And again, Matthew and Edith don't question it at all. So, like, I have reason to believe that he's right, that, like, he seems to have bad luck. Like, just working off the concept of karma as it appears in, like, Indian religions and stuff.
Yeah.
Having bad karma will lead you to having, like, bad luck and stuff in some interpretations. So I think, like, he's basically suggesting that since he's forsworn, he's now cursed with just always putting his foot in his mouth, having bad luck.
And he does it so many times in this chapter, right? Like, you can't help but start to view him as just kind of pathetic over the course of this chapter. He just keeps fucking up.
And that might be this karma. Like, he's just constantly
we're being affected by karma.
Yeah, well, we're seeing things through the perspective of these girls who are being affected by karma. Yeah. It's just like, I mean, again, we're keeping the politics out of it again this week, but
fuck that. Let's get political.
I can't help but view Charles as like a bit of a metaphor for somebody who's like a convicted criminal or who has a life sentence or whatever. I mean, the comparison is pretty much invited by the text.
He brings up the idea of the injustice in the prison system as a result of America's privatization of prisons, right? And and then from then on, you can't drop the idea of Charles in prisons.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and the whole concept here is he's stuffed up. He's done one thing wrong.
Yeah.
Depending on how true his interpretation of the events is, like, it wasn't even that bad what he did. And now, like, he can't practice, which is kind of in a metaphor for getting a job. He's lost all these sorts of basic rights. Like, he doesn't get to sit in on the audience with these things. Like, he's sort of, lost his right to vote or whatever. Like,
yeah,
he's considered, it's lucky for him to be the town's punching bag because it's the closest he can get to a job. Like, it's just...
He walks into a place and immediately invokes the, if not hatred, at least disgust of everyone there, right?
Yeah, disgust is definitely a good word for it. So yeah,
sorry, I just have to point out the bit where they're in the Carmine Beast's lair and the 3 horsemen or whatever arrive, and they're immediately like, Charles, you have, and he's like, I know.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Like, he's just so beaten down. And I'm quite sympathetic to Charles. I'm actually kind of willing to believe him on all this stuff, and I actually think he probably is a good guy who got to really, like, pour into the stick. And I think part of it is because the story's invited me to make this metaphor of seeing him as someone who's been convicted by the system and is not getting a second chance.
Yeah, definitely.
Which makes it funny, like, the idea of bringing him on this trip, because he can't even really go into this domain. So it's like, bringing him on this trip is almost like, they send kids to prison to scare them out of becoming prisoners.
Straight program,
yeah, exactly. Like, I think maybe part of the reason for that is, for bringing him is that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it seems like Charles is around to be the example of what not to do to our 3 main characters.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the idea that this book, the fact that it's an active mystery, feels so different to the experience I've had reading other Wabo works. Like, obviously all of them have had elements of mystery throughout, but this one is the only one that's explicitly setting up a mystery from the start. And I'm so, like, in the mode of questioning and overanalyzing everything. And the Otherverse that this story is set in is all about, like, theatrics and lying and identities and truths. Like, it's so theatrical, and the story is such an interesting experience because of it. I'm really enjoying it so far.
It's a really perfect blend, isn't it? Like, we've got this world where, everything is... We've got these spirits around everywhere that are just like these concepts of meaning. We can visualize the connections between everything. Everyone has to tell the truth, and yet there's still, like, a murder mystery. Yeah, it's so much fun. I agree. Yeah. I'm trying to avoid, like, working myself into a knot over analyzing everything, but I'm failing miserably. I'm diving down so many stupid rabbit holes trying to figure out extra clues. Lots of extrapolating going on over here.
Yeah. There's a lot of again, just a lot of threads to tug at, which is very interesting. And I'm glad, we decided on doing this this podcast when we heard that we were going back to the world of Pact. But I'm really glad now that we're both reading this story for the first time, and it's so mysterious. Like, it's just such a fun setup.
You're right. I don't think this story would be as fun to do with the format where somebody's already read it. It's much more fun for both of us to just be going crazy trying to figure it out. And the audience as well. Like, I think the audience not knowing as well. Like, we're all in this ship together.
Yeah.
So I guess the last thing I want to touch on in this sort of campfire scene is Verona and Lucy are constantly butting in, like, over each other. Like, it's this dynamic we've already talked about a bunch where somebody will say something like, oh, I used to be a heartless practitioner. And Verona's like, can you tell us more about that? And then Lucy's like, no, shut up. Like, keep it on topic. Like, she's so mission focused. And it already starts to feel like, it's very much starting to feel like something that's going to lead to some kind of conflict.
Yeah.
Like, maybe not a major one, like maybe just some sort of minor one, but, like, you can already see them kind of just, like, grating on each other, the way that they're both constantly, like, pivoting the conversation 90 degrees.
Yeah, I wonder. Like, obviously they have this dynamic of they've known each other for long enough that they've got to this point of being comfortable just kind of what we in Australia would call shit talking, and yeah, exactly, right. And Avery is so clearly not at that place with them. Like, she's still so awkward around them. I don't know. I wonder how that dynamic is going to play out more.
I mean, that's the really interesting thing with all this is, like, I was just talking about how those two are constantly butting over each other, asking questions. Avery says, like, 3 things in this whole conversation to them. Like, Verona and Lucy each say, like, 20 or 30. Like, she speaks barely at all. Like, she's right down there with Edith for number of words said. She actually even gets interrupted a few times as she's starting to speak. And I'll talk more about this maybe a little bit in the next chapter, but, like, definitely, you know, that's the third side to this potential conflict between the other two butting heads, is Avery not having as much of a voice as she would. And, you know, we've just talked about how much this world seems to rely on, like, theatrics and all that. Starting to get a little worried that Avery's, you know, quietly sitting in the corner. That's not good for your theatrical points.
Yeah. I mean, it comes back to this idea of the balance between them, right? And this is something Avery explicitly thinks about when they're at the campsite. It's like, what am I going to do to not just be the third one, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
We'll have to see. Yeah. They arrive finally at the domain of the Carmine Beast, and when they get there, they meet the other 3 horsemen, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is so fascinating. First of all, we had no idea that there were more. Like, should somebody have brought this up? The
fact that the Carmine Beast was one of a group of 4, like, forces. I don't know. I mean, obviously they're not fully analogous to the biblical horsemen, but they kind of have this vibe of, like, strong personifications of concepts, right? I got the vibe that there was Carmine is like war or like hunting, kind of. There's one who's gold, who I just kind of put down as greed. I don't know. And then the 2 others, one of them has this kind of deathy vibe, and then there's the woman in the white furs who is, I don't know, commerce, something. Who knows?
Well, but if you go off your 4 horsemen thing, she would be Conquest. Because Conquest had the white horse.
Okay, that kind of makes sense.
But I don't know. I don't want to stick them on the 4 horsemen too much, because, like, Matthew brings up a different comparison, which was the azure dragon, the vermilion bird, the white tiger, and the black tortoise. And so I googled those, and they are like this. What's the quadrio? What's the trio version, but for a group of 4?
Quartet.
Yes, that's the one.
Or quartet if you're in
this big quartet of, like, you know, powerful beings, and they don't, like, map like to the horsemen, but, you know, they similarly have these things where they're associated with different seasons, like different, you know, all sorts of different motifs. Like, I think what I've come out of here is maybe, you know, these 4 aren't going to map explicitly to the 4 horsemen, or these 4, like, you know, Chinese like mythological beings, but it's going to kind of be similar-ish. Like, what's being tapped into is this idea that a lot of cultures seem to set up having, you know, a handful of very powerful beings that were responsible for managing the world in a way that's a bit different from gods. So, yeah, I definitely agree. The black one seems to be death. Carmine was obviously, like, war / the hunt. But it'll be interesting to see exactly what the white and the gold one end up being, especially because the gold one's riding a centipede, which, like, is barely referenced, despite the fact that it's fucking bonkers.
Yeah, you're right. I forgot about that. It's weird that goes mostly uncommented on.
Nobody seems to care that this gold person is riding a giant centipede. But yeah, I mean, the concept of these roles in and of itself is also just kind of fascinating. Like, because they're not gods, but they're like, but I think the best example is there's sort of this idea of they're like the Court of Appeals.
I kind of got that vibe too.
And just, like, with Charles's stuff in mind, I couldn't help but start to think, like, is this going to be a big theme for Pale as a story? Some of this stuff dealing with, like, justice and punishment.
The legal system, you know.
Like, it's starting to feel like a recurring thread. So, like, I'd almost be more interested if I was trying to come up with what gold and white represent. Like, look at what other things need to be adjudicated.
What other judicial branches there are.
Like, I don't know how much I want to rely on
the
current
white
Western
furs
things.
Is the judge, whatever.
Yeah,
Interesting.
so
I do like the idea that, you know, this is a story that's about figuring out who committed a crime. Well, what happens next? We need some kind of like court or like verdict or trial, you know. And I can kind of see these three being like three judges that hand down a sentence to whoever killed the Carmine Beast.
yeah, you're right, because that's going to be the other half of it. Is it's not just figuring out who did it, but what happens then.
What happens next? Exactly.
And you're right. Like we're going to start talking about justice and punishment in this world, I suppose. And that could be really interesting to dive into.
Yeah, yeah. I'm kind of interested to think about. Like, we don't know exactly where this story is going to go, but it can't just be, oh, it was them, all right, and that's the end of the story, right? Like,
yeah, that's not really how Warbo writes. Like, I'd be very surprised if it was just like, oh, and it was this person, and we caught them now. Roll credits.
Yeah.
Like, I think this. Yeah, I, and that's the thing. Like, all this stuff is starting to make me think. I think the story is going to start to talk about, well, how should we handle when someone does this? As much as, you know, finding out who did it.
Yeah. The way it works, I don't know how much you know, at least in kind of America. In the criminal justice system, the people are represented by two separate yet equally important groups. There's the police who investigate crime and the district attorneys who prosecute the offenders. And presumably these are their stories, Elliot.
I mean, we're in Canada.
Yeah, it's Law and Order Kennet, exactly. Anyway,
that duality is actually really relevant because that's what we're sort of talking about. These, like the Kenneteers, have been set up as the police, and what the story is already starting to bring up a bit thematically is that second half is just as, if not more, important.
Yeah, exactly. And we're kind of setting up the powers that govern over that, right?
Yeah, exactly. One of them's who's been murdered, so it's going to have to come up.
Yeah,
we have one of our top, you know, high court. I think in the US it's the Supreme Court. I don't know how it works in Canada, but one of the top 4 judges is the, you know, murder victim. Like that's that's going to come into it.
Yeah. So the other thing that we get here is we get our 2 primary suspects, right? Or at least we get what, you know, again, to take a leaf out of American cop shows, you need means, motive, and opportunity, and we find the motive here, or a motive. Which is that the people who are next in line for the Lord of Kennet is either our boy John, the Dog of War, or the Hungry Choir, who I guess would rule by tribunal.
Yeah, and obviously we're going to dive into both of them in the next chapter, so we don't quite need to go into them here, but like obviously, I think the thing here is this is the first part where the story is sort of saying, okay, here are 2 people.
Here are some suspects,
here's where you should suspects. Start.
And God, the Hungry Choir, like they're so obviously evil, right? Like we've talked a lot about how the others in Kennet seem to be mostly pretty nice. That excludes the Hungry Choir pretty obviously, who seem to be openly malicious. So I feel like that's where we're being led of like, hey, it's probably these guys, right? John is interesting. We learned a bit more about him. John being this like incarnation of war spirit, and the Carmine Beast being kind of an incarnation of hunting, stuff like that. There's overlap there, like natural conflict between 2 incarnations of violence, essentially. Maybe there's something there.
Yeah. I mean, I guess my thought is it's way too early in the story for the 2 prime suspects to actually be valid. I mean, that's a bit of a doylistic.
No, I'm with you though.
Look at it.
I think that's what when someone sits down to write a murder mystery, you kind of think, all right, who are the first few suspects that are too obvious, and I'm going to put them at the start of the story so you know it's not them.
Yeah, but like even in universe, I'm questioning the whole kill the Carmine Beast to replace them system. Like I don't. It's again, especially because it's been brought up so early. I like something that came to my mind is, you know, lots of good murder stories have a second victim. I wonder if one of these other 3 we just met will be next.
Yeah,
because you know they one of the things they mention is it doesn't always have to be 4. It doesn't always have to be 3, or it can be 1. Like, if someone's powerful enough to kill the Carmine Beast, maybe they're powerful enough to also try and take out the other 3 and try and set themselves up as a sole like adjudicator of the area, take on the role of like ruler.
especially if they get power from killing the Carmine Beast, like they're stronger now, so presumably easier to kill the other ones.
Well, to work this into this metaphor, if we have this established judicial system, which like seemingly is kind of shit, especially from my Charles's perspective, maybe this is someone who just wants to overthrow it and implement a new one. And I think that's interesting to tie into the whole concept of Kennet as somewhere that's like this oasis for others away from humans. Like it already operates differently. Like it would kind of make sense that someone from Kennet is seeing this other system and thinking that's not good enough or it's too harsh or whatever. So yeah, I guess I wouldn't be surprised if we get a second victim and it turns out to be one of the other three, because someone or a group of someones is maybe pitching to just replace the entire system.
Yeah.
In fact, I'd love for it to be a trio of villains, just to kind of map to our trio of heroes. That could be fun.
That's interesting. Kind of dark reflection of them.
Yeah,
a pale reflection of them.
Oh boy.
We've predicted it with the title of the show.
So I'm going to be keeping my eye out for actually trying to build a group of 3 who I think would map a different judicial system.
Interesting.
I have no idea who to start putting on that list yet, but one day it'll happen. Probably just after we find out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out right after our Boo reveals it.
Yep.
Cool. So that's the end of that chapter, right? That's the end of 1.3. We dive into 1.4, which is everyone heading back home again after going to the Lair of the Beast. They were only there. It's like a 2-day round trip, and they were there for like 10 minutes.
I mean, there was probably more we didn't see, but it kind of been that useful because none of the information we didn't see comes up. So, I mean, that's just the nature of a place that's always 24 hours away, I guess.
Yeah, just a bit of a nightmare to visit.
But 1.4 definitely opens with Avery sort of in full-on crisis mode of what is my role in this group going to be? We've just met 3 intrinsic roles to the region, and now Avery's sitting here like, wait, what's mine?
Yeah, how is she going to play into the trio? And she kind of comes up with a sort of idea later, which is to counterbalance Lucy's impulsiveness and Verona's impulsiveness and Lucy's kind of natural curiosity by being the one who plays it safe. Not a bad role to play.
No, I mean, even Charles can immediately see that it's not a good fit for her. I don't know what I'll just say it now. But like my thinking was already at this stage in the chapter, like Avery, she's got the deer imagery. She's someone, she brings up, she's a forward. She moves fast. She's got stamina. Her whole thinking here is she's like, I can't make a splash. I need to find a way where I can make a splash. I'm wondering if maybe she needs to do the opposite. If she wants to play into her natural strengths, she's someone who's quick and she's someone who slips under the radar.
Yeah, be the one who operates in the shadows, kind of.
Yeah. Like, not an assassin in the sense that I want her to go around killing people, but
executing,
but an assassin in the sense that she's stealthy. And like, we already start to see her manipulate these connections between people like her family. Like, I think that's where she needs to go into. I think she actually should start to be the person who notices things but isn't noticed.
Which I think fits, but it fits in this very Wild Boar-esque way where leaning into that is leaning into the thing that has caused her pain and suffering in the past, right?
Even better.
Like it's a very monkey's paw situation of like, you want a specialty? Okay, your specialty is not being noticed by people, which is the exact thing that basically caused her to have a breakdown, right?
Yeah, totally. Like it's definitely a monkey's paw situation, but like she has already been the person in Lucy's notes who's dropping down notes about how people are relating to each other and how they feel. Like I think, she, like Lucy's going to be the one kind of bullheadedly asking all these questions relating to the thing, and Avery's going to be the one who notices, the connection coming out of someone's pocket, right? Like she does with her brother. Like she's going to be the one who sees the clues while she's standing out the back, not being the focus.
Yeah, I like that. I really like that idea. I think it's supported by the text. I think that's where we're going to be going. So let's see. So basically the gist of the first part of this chapter is Charles giving a primer on how tricky this world is, and how much trouble they're in, and how dangerous, what exactly John and the Hungry Choir are.
Yeah, but you're right. He definitely sort of opens with like a bit of a speech on the various ways they're totally screwed.
Yeah.
Like I think the best bit for me is when he's sort of like, a lot of these beings have been like playing these chess games for
Yes.
hundreds of years. You're
Yeah.
not going to win. Like, I don't
What
care
does
how
he say?
naturally
Like,
good you
since
are.
he says, since before humans were wearing shoes or something like
Yeah,
that,
yeah. Um,
which is classic.
and then we sort of start to dive into like a bit of the lawyering on the wording
Yeah, the
of the
word
awakening
trickery.
ritual.
Yeah.
Yeah, like how you can get around that. Something I
Yeah.
noticed that isn't brought up is nobody talks about, like, if an other goes for one of their families, does
Mm.
that count as harm to their mind? I would argue it would, but maybe some other things would argue it wouldn't. Like, that's just another loophole I noticed they didn't touch on is you don't have to directly attack one of the Kenneteers to hurt
To
them.
to influence them as well. You can kind of threaten to
Yes.
kill their dad, and then most of them will try and stop that. I think.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd hope so.
You'd hope so. Yeah. I love that. I think it's this section where Charles talks about the wording of none of them will willfully cause harm, and then basically goes through all the ways that can be abused. And it's this
Yeah.
great way of Charles showing basically just how terrifying they should think this world is.
Yeah. Well, and again, like, it's just showing, like, I think when you first hear, others and practitioners can't lie, you're sort
Yeah.
of like, oh, okay, well, that's going to make things simple. And then
Yeah.
what Walbo does is shows us that actually the English language is a bit of a joke, and you can get away with a lot of shit while telling the technical truth.
Yeah.
And I think that's like a great way, because like we've just talked about how the magic in this world is so interpretive and non-quantifiable, and so to have the kind of other basis of it be that language has to be true, and then you start to realize that language is surprisingly interpretive and non-quantifiable. It's all just added together to this universe. It's just so not strict rules. Everything can be bent, and it's all a matter of knowing how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The fact that people can't lie makes it worse, because it leads to these situations of like Avery, Verona, Lucy kind of implicitly trust people at their word. It's like you don't even question things because people can't lie.
Yeah. Like, you have to resist the urge to like triple read everything that's said and try and like see the ways around it. And that's basically, I mean, we get a practice session on how to do that from Charles here.
Classic. Good work, Charles. Again, just reinforcing to them, hey, things can go so badly in this world that you've accidentally signed, or not accidentally, but stupidly signed yourselves up to be a part of forever.
Yeah.
And we get this moment of Avery being like, this is all too much. Because it is, like, it's too much. Like, that's the thing.
Yeah, she has the first one back when she was in Carmine's domain, and she meets the other three, and it's sort of like, she's like, wow, we're really out of our depth. And then this conversation with Charles, you're right, leads to the second, like, we're just going to die, aren't we? sort of moment.
Or, yeah, just like, I mean, no practitioner would be a practitioner if they fully understood the depth of how crazy some of this stuff gets.
I mean, that's what Charles seems to be implying, yes. Like, she's like, what would you do if you were us? And he's like, well, I wouldn't have done the ritual. It's like, well, I mean,
thanks,
maybe
Charles.
That's true.
Very
Not
helpful.
Yeah.
So we get this moment of Avery kind of making a bit of a defensive play. She suggests that they all kind of agree to make some rules that restrict when they're doing deals or doing practice. And Verona, out of hand, does not like this idea.
Yeah, and there's kind of a reason for the first one that even like Charles brings up. And then there's sort of like an amendment that Avery proposes to stick to our legal sort of terminology. But Lucy has her back, which I thought was very nice to see. I'm hyper aware now of how third wheely Avery can be, so it's nice to see Lucy side with her over Verona on something.
I don't even think Lucy comes down, like, I don't think Lucy sides with Avery because she necessarily agrees. She just kind of wants to back up Avery here. That's the read I had on it, at least, which is just very nice. Very nice work by Lucy.
Yeah, although again, like that's the thing with a triangle is like whenever you've got
Yeah,
a
it's always going to be
two-sided
teaming
argument,
up. Yeah.
it's always going to be imbalanced. Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I this is an important discussion to be having actually. Like Avery does bring up a good point, which is why I think they spend a bit of time on it. Like what what are they going to do because they're tied together in this way? How are they going to what rules are they going to set up for themselves to make sure they work as a team and don't one of them doesn't run off and screw the other two?
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe a conversation that should have been had before they awoke, but whatever, better late than never.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't even. That's the thing, right? They did the awakening ritual before they even fully understood the world that they were entering. It's just like they were just so not prepared.
Yeah. And of course, but what we really see here from Verona is she's even just refusing the sort of more calm thing, which is like just big decisions that will affect all three of them need to have at least 2 votes, which like seems like a pretty reasonable request, really.
Yeah.
And Verona's still sort of like, no, and she ties it to this whole thing about how everyone in the real world is miserable because they're working shitty jobs to pay a house that they don't even like.
Because of rules, basically.
Yeah, she basically implies like it's exactly what we saw in her opening chapter with the chores in the house. Like she has this very distinct impression that everyone who's an adult is miserable, which I mean, we met her father, I get why she thinks like that. But she has all these concepts of nobody who's an adult is happy and is like gotten what they want out of their life, and I'm still just confused as to what Verona expects happy to look like, or what does Verona see 20 years from now Verona doing that is like good and a good outcome? And she's 13, she may not have actually thought of that. She just knows that this other stuff is not it. Like she just wants to try something different.
Yeah, I think she just feels like her life is not good or not happy, and therefore, she doesn't want anything that moves towards her old life.
Well, yeah, and going for the white picket fence and the standard, like, the sort of just getting a job and all that doesn't seem to be making other people happy.
Yeah, I mean, the practice is an escape for her, right? Like, clearly.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's her way of having fun. Like, she keeps framing it as fun as well. So it's not even just an escape. It's like this way to find happiness, I guess. And, I mean, based on what we're learning about this world, I don't know if that's an accurate read on what it's going to do.
Yeah.
But I'd love for someone to sit Verona down and be like, okay, what does a happy adult Verona look like to you? Because I'm still a little unclear on that.
Yeah, definitely. I think she is too. I think this is a good scene because it gives us our first look at what does it look like when these three have a disagreement, right? This is the first disagreement they have outside of that chocolate bar fiasco, which wasn't huge. It was just kind of a little thing.
No, Ruben, the chocolate bar fiasco was huge.
Yeah, sorry, it's a central incident of the entire... Huge. Yeah, exactly. But no, it's just interesting to see, like, the dynamic that they have when they interact, and it's not bad. Like, yes, it doesn't go great, but it goes okay. Lucy kind of acts as the mediator in this conversation, and I think it's good. I think it's good. They do good.
Yeah, I agree. Like, as sort of much as I'm giving them shit for not having had this conversation beforehand or whatever, I mean, not that they probably knew enough to really have it. They couldn't,
yeah.
Like, Verona's point that she makes at the end of, like, we shouldn't rush into this, can we think on it? I do think that was probably Verona just, like, making the conversation go away, and, she's not going to really think on it. But it is a good point. They should think on it. Like, there's a great ironic bit. I think it was actually last chapter where after the chocolate bar promise comes out, Lucy tells them, we can't make any more impulsive oaths. Promise. And it's kind of like, well, okay. I mean, you're almost there.
That just was one. Yeah.
But like, yeah. So like, Verona's right here. Like, they shouldn't just make these decisions in a 2-minute thing. But I'm not convinced that she was saying that because she's genuinely going to go back and think on it. I think she was just saying it to get out of the conversation she doesn't like and
I think
go away.
Yeah.
But you're right. Like, overall, I think they handled it pretty well. I'd be interested to see whether Avery and or Verona are as good at playing the mediator when it's the other two having a fight.
Yeah, we'll see, I guess.
Yeah.
I feel like Avery would be good at it. I don't know about Verona. We'll have to see.
Avery would probably just not I could see Avery not being like enough of a presence to actually act as a mediator. Those two would
Mm.
just be fighting, and she would get kind of drowned out
She
every
wouldn't
time
be
she
able to
tried
get
to
in the middle.
mediate.
Yeah, definitely.
I think Verona would just have already made up her mind or find the quickest way out of the conversation. I don't know how she'd go as a mediator, but we'll see. Maybe I'm being unfair.
So Charles gives more information on John, the dog of war, and just on the concept of dogs in general, I guess.
It's so cool.
It is very cool. I love it. It's very like juicy world building stuff, which is the exact kind of stuff that I live for in the Otherverse content. I'm very keen on meeting him and learning more.
Yes, and it looks like we'll be getting that next chapter. Toad Swallow allowing. Yeah, so what's fascinating to me about these dogs of war is that they just sort of they pop up as a consequence of human action. Like, they're not naturally occurring in the sense that, they're like native flora and fauna. Like, like Edith is something that occurs naturally in the world. John feels different because he's like this side effect of human behavior.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is all coming into all this stuff we've been talking about, where the Otherverse is setting itself up as this place that relies on like meaning and interpretation. And like war, like, again, this just seems like it manifests like, there's been lots of stuff that's talked about how, soldiers who come back from war, sometimes the war comes back with them. And John seems like this interesting manifestation of that. Like, the war has imprinted not just on the people, but like kind of on the world of the Otherverse.
Yeah.
And he's this embodiment of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll just kind of see as we learn more about him, but I really like we're meeting more different types of others. It's not just goblins and trolls and shit. There's like all kinds of weird ideas and concepts born to life.
Yeah, the two that we talk about in this chapter, the Hungry Choir and John, they're very they're much more abstract than just like, it's a vampire but it sparkles. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Wobbo's really gone the whole 9 yards to come up with something really, really interesting.
Yeah, the Hungry Choir as well is a great example of this because, when we found out they were a ritual incarnate, everyone was like, what the fuck is that? And it's basically, it seems to be like an urban myth ritual, like, summoning Candyman or the elevator game, which is just kind of, when enough people do this urban myth, it kind of manifests into an entity.
Yeah, so again, it's similar to John in that it's something that seems to sprout up based on human actions.
Yeah, human, like, perceptions and effort.
Now I'm wanting to try to tie to how that fits into this whole judicial justice metaphor we're building. But anyway, I'll come back for that next week, I suppose.
Yeah. Stay tuned.
I hadn't heard of the elevator game before.
And do you want to explain it for people who haven't? Basically, it's like this thing where if you follow a certain set of steps, like pushing buttons in an elevator in a certain sequence, you can get to a floor between floors. And it's like a special, like, alternate plane that you can get to by going to floor 3 and then floor 7 and 2 and whatever in a certain order.
Yeah, and there's all these restrictions. It's exactly what I was picturing after we got the details on what the rituals are. Like, the whole, like, there was the time one that Charles gives as an example. I mean, so this is so fascinating. So I think we've already been having discussions off air that we're going to talk about here about what we think the Hungry Choir might be.
Well, should we do it now? Do you want to drop your prediction?
Okay. Yeah. So I'm pretty convinced that the choir is going to somehow tie into this singing talent show that Avery's family's obsessed with.
Yeah.
I might be bringing my own opinion of reality TV into this theory, but it's trash and totally fits with like what the Hungry Choir's whole vibe is. Yeah,
like it's will you sell out yourself in order to win a prize, basically, is the idea behind these kind of reality shows. And maybe that's a bit of an overly cynical interpretation, but it's an interpretation.
I'm guessing what's going to happen is we're going to learn soon that like one of those talent shows is having auditions, or there's rumors of a ritual to get onto one of the shows. Like if you do, if you sing in front of the mirror or whatever, then you'll get lucky and get an audition. I don't know, like there'll be some ritual that ties into those singing shows, and like so the second part of my theory is that Avery's family is going to get trapped up. Charles specifically brings up that the hungry choir could attack them if they sort of fall into its traps, and
Yeah.
that presumably applies to Avery's family. So I think,
Yeah.
yeah, it'll probably be Stephanie. If you want me to pick one member of the family to get caught up in it, it'll be Stephanie and her mum. That's two,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, fair enough. Something I liked is after you told me about this theory, I was rereading and I saw there's a line where Charles says, all we know about the Hungry Choir is they arose somewhere else and they've settled here, at least for a little while, which tracks with the idea of this reality show as like a local licensed Canadian version of what is originally like a UK, usually reality show.
Yeah, I like that. I hadn't thought of that. That's good. But I mean, like, the other thing is, the other imagery that's come up for the Hungry Choir is the people all have bad teeth, and maybe that'll play into the ritual more, or maybe
from
like
the UK.
Oh,
sorry, that's horrible.
I was gonna say that they have like, there's a lot of people on TV with very fake teeth, like what's a teeth that get very processed, and maybe that's the flip side of it. I don't know, that's probably reaching a bit, but yeah. But you had a different pick for the choir, right?
As I was reading through this, the thing that came to me is Class Ranker, the app where they rank each other. And I do like your point with the show. I think it could be, but Class Ranker to me was seated as this thing that it just seems so out of place. Like, it seems so weird. And I don't think it fits as well because, again, we don't fully understand what the ritual could be, but I see it as like this app that gets people to rate each other is kind of a way of doing like social damage to each other. It's like setting up a conflict between people who do it. And, there are going to be winners and losers of this app, and whoever comes in last place, maybe there's some like, not ritual, but like thing that they have to do, or I don't know. I just, it hasn't fully coalesced, but the idea of Class Ranker, the app, is so strange to me. I feel like it has to, there's more to it. And I think this is a great way of that playing out. I think it could be. It also fits with a classic Wildbow move of setting up a major antagonist in your very first chapter.
I guess, yeah, like maybe the ritual, like I think we actually had names dropped in 1.1 of who the students were that started the Class Ranker for their class.
Yeah.
So maybe they're the ones doing the ritual.
Yeah.
I would think that if Class Ranker was involved, they would be the thirsty choir, not the hungry choir.
Yes, the imagery of the singing obviously works very well with the reality show, and not as well for mine. But yeah,
I don't know. I'm still sort of sticking by my theory that Class Ranker isn't magical at all, and it's just going to be like a normal, like benign teenage shit show. Like, because you don't need magic for your teenage years to just explode.
Of course.
I don't know. Like, I mean, some other like TV shows like Buffy and some others have had things where you think there's like something magical and then it just turns out to be like normal everyday human problems. And I've always really liked those twists. So part of me is just hoping that Class Ranker is going to turn out to just be like, normal human problems.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, I think yours feels more likely, the idea of people being hungry for stardom and going on this TV show. I don't know. It just, Class Ranker still stands out to me.
Class Ranker, I'll be surprised if it's not a thing, whether it's like a magic thing or whether it's the Hungry Choirs thing. Yeah. I'm less confident, but I agree. Class Ranker's almost certainly going to be a thorn in our side at some point in the story.
Yeah. But the people all go home. Lucy and Verona go back to their houses, and Avery goes back to her house. And we start to meet her family. And what a family it is. There are 5 children and 2 parents and a grandpa. So it's a very busy household. It feels busy. It feels very chaotic. And you can kind of start to see how easy it might be for Avery to just kind of get lost in the chaos of this house.
Yeah, like something I brought up in my live reads. I'm from a fairly small family, but I had nearby cousins who we used to visit pretty frequently, and there were 7 kids. The 2 parents, my grandpa's lived there at various points as well, and also just like I don't think I ever visited there and was the only person visiting. Like when you have a big household like that, there's just always so much going on that there was like at least another group of people like there for some reason, and I was amazed at how this chapter immediately took me back to visiting my cousin's place as a kid. Like Wildbow just nailed the sense, like I'd walk in, people would be leaving as I arrived. They'd be like, "Oh, hi, Elliot. Bye, Elliot." And they go, like we'd there'd be someone in the kitchen who would then have to go and attend some other emergency, so they'd palm the kitchen off to someone else. Like, it was, I've seen all of the things that exactly happened in this chapter happen at my cousin's house, and I was just like, I was amazed at how perfectly Wahlberg captured this vibe. And as you said, how I was immediately like, God, no wonder Avery was able to just like fall under the radar so easily. Like, this is chaos. Like, you can see why.
Yeah. It's intense. You can kind of see why Avery is not having a great time at home. I mean, yeah, clearly her family wasn't great to her in the past, and it seems like things have gotten better. Her mum seems to be really nice and actually like genuinely putting in a lot of effort to look out for her and interact with her after failing in the past.
Yeah, like, I mean, that's the thing. I actually got the impression that Avery is very loved as she gets.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of her family greets her. Like, her grandpa's obviously quite close to her. Stephanie's an asshole, and so's Declan for most of it. But like, she seems to get on with Kerry and Rowan.
Yeah.
So like, honestly, having a 50% ratio of siblings you get on with and siblings you don't at age 13, that's pretty good.
Not too bad. Yeah, definitely.
So like, I really get the sense that they did love her this whole time. They just didn't notice. Like, and I'm not excusing it or anything. Like, it's still bad that this happened to her. But I guess it's more understandable. Like, I guess the point I'm trying to make is it's not that she had this, bad period in her life because she was unloved. It was just because they didn't realize, like, and the second they found out something was going wrong, like, her mum is, taking these times to try and fix it. And there's that resentment that it took so long, and it took Miss Hardy presumably to make it happen.
I love that Avery kind of suspects that Miss Hardy must have got involved because she doesn't trust her parents to just have made this realization by themselves.
Yeah, and it's like a very understandable grudge to be holding on to. And like, I get it all, but it's like, I don't know, like, I can't bring myself to hate her family for it as much, because I think they're just, they just didn't know, I suppose. It wasn't
too many kids to take care of.
Yeah. It's a very complicated situation. I quite like how I'm immediately all like, oh, I can see both sides, and I can see why she shouldn't be mad, but why she is.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Very understandable. I really love this part. We have this part where there's a encounter between Avery and her younger. He's 10 years old. Younger brother Declan, and she calls him a penis, and it's this great moment where she then has to kind of backtrack and justify it, and she does really well, right? Like, I was impressed by how well she did this. She, like, maybe she isn't to the same extent a natural practitioner as Verona is, but she really clearly has the right pattern of thinking for practicing. She kind of improvises this justification, which seems to work perfectly to solve the problem.
Yeah, I mean, she's had a number of like deer in the headlights moments in this story.
Deer in the headlights.
That's what it is. I mean,
it is. You're right, and I love it. That's what it is.
And she does freeze for a bit here, but she recovers, and as you said, she does a really good job. Like, she's maybe not as quick as Verona, but she's hardly bad at this. And you're right, it seems to have like worked because she does a rune a bit later. So she's and it works flawlessly. So she doesn't seem to have lost power. Like, that's the only way I would be able to gauge if the spirits were punishing her. So yeah, like, I mean, I think she got out of it pretty well. I mean, she's right. He was being a dick. Like, I thought her explanation went pretty well.
Yeah, I think so. I like one of the lines she says is, "I never want you in my face ever."
It's pretty good.
Avery. Yes. And then she also has this bit in the same encounter when she instinctively does some like connection manipulation. This is what you were alluding to before by saying, that she seems to be especially talented at this. And you're right. Like, her, obviously the three have different versions of the sight, and Avery seems to be more concrete in terms of seeing these bands between things. And so I can see her being a kind of practitioner that specializes in these connections, which, I don't know, is presumably a type of magic that exists in this world.
Yeah, I'm going to call them magipulators.
Yeah,
magical manipulators.
I definitely think Avery would be a great manipulator.
Yeah, so that's the word I'm going to go with until we learn what they're actually called. But yeah, like as you said, like her sight focuses on it. She's noticing connections between things as well. Like I think this is starting to form as a bit of a specialty for her, I suppose, and I can't wait for it. Like
Yeah.
what are the limits here? Like she can see the chocolate bar in his pocket. Like that's pretty powerful. Like what are the limits to what she can see and what she can't see, you know? Like how deep do these connections go? And like yeah, I don't know, it's going to be fascinating to just kind of watch her explore how good she can get at this because I have absolutely no intuition about how powerful she's going to be able to get at spotting links between things.
Yeah, it's yeah. So the chocolate bar she sees because she sees there's still a connection between Declan and her. So she kind of surmises that he's stolen one of her things, which is right. But yeah, I wonder if she can even get more specific. Like if she'll even start to be able to recognize certain objects by the connections that they have and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. Like, so one of the things that comes up right at the start of 1.3, she notices there's a connection between Matthew's truck and like the office.
Mm.
And like, I don't even quite know what that's meant to represent now, but it's like this idea of like, there are
Maybe
so
it's
many of
a
these
rental.
connections. Yeah, but like, what are the boundaries of what is represented by a
Yeah,
connection, you know? Like, and
yeah.
what is, and even if we know what those boundaries are, what are the boundaries of what, Avery's going to be able to see and manipulate? Like, there's a lot of unknowns here. It's going to be a really fun thing to explore.
Yeah, definitely.
There's also a fun bit where Avery sort of says to her dad after they've caught Declan with the chocolate bar, she says, "Stealing has to be extra punishment, right?" And her dad sort of responds, "Your mum and I will work it out. The house would descend into anarchy if you got input on each other's punishments." And, and again, like I'm building this whole narrative of justice and punishment being a through line in this story. I wonder if this is going to be a line that we look back on with a lot more weight when we finish the story. I don't quite
Yeah.
know if it's saying anything specific at this point, but it feels like one of
Who's
those things where I'm like, okay, this will be a thing later in the story.
who's gonna have input? Like, is this the Kennet others having input on the punishment for the murderer, or like,
Yeah,
yeah, I agree with
exactly.
you. There's something interesting here.
Maybe if I'm right that somebody else is trying to instill like a new justice system
Mm,
into the area. Like, maybe this will be a comment on the new system they propose. Like, maybe it's like some sort of anarchist or somebody like somebody who believes in the purge or whatever. And this is a comment on that. I don't know. I'm talking
yeah,
out my ass. So yeah.
we'll
I
see.
don't
Let's move on.
know.
So Avery and her family sit down to watch the Hungry Choirs TV show, and Avery, there's a bit of a weird interaction with her family before Avery uses magic to kind of make them not notice her leave the house because she leaves to go meet the rest of the trio.
It just kind of clicked for me. You could call. I've literally just had this thought now. This isn't in the
Mm.
notes, so sorry for springing it on you, Ruben. But
What's it going to be?
the well, her family habitually, or you could even say ritually, watches this television show.
It's true. It's true.
I don't have the second step to that thought. I've just
Yeah,
had the first
it's
one.
a seed of an idea.
Yeah, exactly. It's sharing it with everyone a bit early, but that might be something we can work with later.
Yeah.
Um, as you said, like the real thing here is she spits on her hand and draws some circles there and kind of blocks her connection to the rest of her family.
Mm.
Which is, like you were talking about that kind of monkey's paw thing. That's kind of what she's doing now. Like she's reverting to the exact behavior of slipping under the radar that got her into trouble last winter. But
Yeah,
also,
explicitly doing it, right? Like explicitly getting
yeah,
herself back into that mode.
yeah, which, gives me hope that she can make it her own thing and maybe find some happiness in it, fingers crossed. But again, like something that really comes up here is like she's not that connected to her family. Like they obviously love her and all that, but these scars from the last winter haven't healed.
Yeah.
She disagrees with everyone else about what they want to watch. She's not out to her family, clearly, based on some stuff Stephanie brings up about a boy
Yes.
and all that, but she does seem to be out to her friends. So there's definitely, there's already these lines being drawn of like she is closer to Verona and Lucy than her own
Yeah.
family, and she's only really known them for a couple of weeks. So Again, hitting that Avery is sort of chronically lonely bit, but also like you can see why she's jumping headfirst into the practice, because she's already closer to these other two than she is to her family in some ways.
Yeah, definitely. Again, Avery is the character so far that I'm the most worried for. Even though she seems to be the most cautious, I'm just kind of like, I don't know. She seems too vulnerable.
Yeah, she does. I agree. I share that nervousness.
Yeah.
But again, the magic she does here is cool. Like,
no, it is cool. It's the exact kind of minor minor self-serving use of magic that I would totally do the most and seems the most fun and also is clearly the most dangerous to be using so willy-nilly.
Like, yeah, haven't we all just wanted the ability at certain points to just spit on our hand, draw a circle on it, and just have everyone leave us the fuck alone?
Yeah, I know.
Like that's a cool superpower.
No questions asked. Yeah, great.
I even think the best thing about like seeing how effectively this diagram that she draws works is like as she spits on her hand, Stephanie is like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Yeah. And then the diagram sort of finishes, and there's just no follow up to that.
Yeah,
and like that's how you know it's working, because like you don't just see your siblings spit on their hand, ask them what the hell's going on, and then they don't respond, and you just drop it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. I'm a bit nervous because there's that whole rebound thing that they brought up already.
Yes,
with the diagrams they drew to keep their parents from calling them all weekend. So, you know, that's presumably some of the cost of this stuff is when you isolate these connections.
Yeah,
you know, I assume they're either going to snap back twice as strong or they're going to break. Neither of those seem like good future situations for Avery to be in. But I mean, again, she's a teenager. She's not thinking that far ahead. And I'm not going to lie, I probably wouldn't either, because I just be, oh, fuck, leave me alone.
Yeah, I've just learned how to do magic. I don't give a shit about the consequences.
I'm not watching some talent show. I'm going to go practice fucking magic.
Yeah, totally. So the trio decide, they're trying to figure out what they're going to do about talking to John, how they're going to go about it. And they are bumped into by Toadswallow, who promises them gifts and then kind of escorts them to the Kennel of War.
I like that. Well done.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, what could possibly go wrong with Toadswallow? He seems like a fine, upstanding gentleman. He wears a vest. In the bushes.
A trustworthy vest. Yeah, they don't comment on this enough. He just crawls out of a bush towards them. Like when they see them, Avery's narration says, Toadswallow and Cherry were crawling towards us along the floor or something. And it's like, okay, yeah, they're goblins, so it's fine. And that's how it slips past you. But why were they in that bush? Were they spying on them? Why'd they, what's going on?
Yeah, you could just imagine they've been like following them in the bush, waiting for the perfect entrance moment. And then he heard the swearing thing. He's like, this is our time. And
this is it.
Rolls out of the bush. Yeah, I mean, the other thing here as well is like, again, the Kenneteers showing absolutely zero chill for this world by still going out on this Sunday night to talk to John. Like, they're not going to wait. They're not
playing it safe.
Tomorrow. Yeah, they've it's Sunday night. They've just gotten back from their camp out, and they're already just diving straight back in.
Yeah, reckless, right?
Yep. So and now they've run into Toadswallow, who I'm sure is just going to help them and. All the stuff Charles was saying about goblins being terrible to interact with, that's probably nothing.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine. And that's the end of 1.4.
Yeah, we should quickly touch on the extra material, though, the notes on the practices.
Yeah, I really liked it. It was nice. I don't think there was that much juicy info as compared to the previous one, which was like a real deep dive into juicy shit on each of the characters.
This one's less stuff to talk about on a podcast heavy, I suppose. Yes. But it was still heavy. I think I've said this every episode so far, but third time's the charm. Like, this is such a cool piece of extra content.
Yeah.
Even if there's not that much new information here that we can use to solve the mystery, like there was last week. Like a lot of this stuff had kind of been explained to us in the text. It's so much easier to visualize just looking at the diagrams.
These diagrams. Yeah, this is the first time I've properly understood what the awakening diagram looked like.
Yeah, admittedly, same. And
we've seen a few of those.
Yeah, like that's a little embarrassing if you know like the pact is 950,000 words in this same world. I think this will help me understand diagrams moving forward. because I'll be able to better visualize it. Like, I think we've already talked about the fact, like, Charles mentions he has all these textbooks or whatever, and I think like I've said back in Deep Impact, I used to say, God, I could just read textbooks in this world.
Yeah,
and that kind of feels like what we're getting here. Like,
Yeah.
this is just a list of diagrams and stuff. Doesn't necessarily add that much to it's perfect supplementary material because it's just really cool. Engrosses me in the world even more. It's going to help me a little bit if diagrams come up, but I just got such a kick out of reading it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, lots of really cool stuff in there.
Yeah. I actually do want to talk, although, because something Walbo is allergic to is not including a little bit of plot or characterization in everything. And he did do that here, because there's 3 pages, and they each have very different handwriting, and I was immediately able to sort of theorize about which belong to which of the Kenneteers. Like the first page has like 2 circles drawn on it, and then pretty much the rest of it is just all this handwritten stuff, and most of it is asking questions about what else can this do. Like, oh, they said this. Can it do this? Can it do this? And I was like, okay, well, that's got to be Verona. Like, all the emphasis is on what extra meaning and stuff can I pull out of this. And it's asking questions about the wider world. That's Verona to a T. Then the second page is Avery. I'll admit the first thing that put me onto this is just it had very neat handwriting. I don't know why, but Avery totally strikes me as a neat handwriting person.
Fair enough.
I'm not aware enough of my own prejudices to know why that is, but I've just decided she's a neat handwriting person. But also, like, the thing that made this solidify for me a bit more is this is the page that deals a lot with the directionality of the forces. It's like, this symbol makes stuff go out, this blocks it, this makes it go in, and she's our deer, she's our mover, she's running around everywhere. She's focusing on the connections, which is like the stuff tying things together, which isn't quite the movement, but like, I don't know, like I think there's something there. And I think that like that all sort of leads up to the third page, which is kind of hilariously Lucy's, because it's like, I mean, it's just kind of the laziest in the sense of the information it's trying to record. Like, one of the circles literally has yada blah written in it instead of the symbol because she didn't get it down, and she just doesn't care. Like, the only thing she actually really gives any attention to is that awakening symbol we talked about, which is like, that ties into the clues of the scene. So that's why she took the time to actually get that one down. But all the actual stuff on how to do extra magic, she's just like, whatever. So like, I just really like
suitably
how like,
chill on it.
Yeah, like I just like how even though it's just a bunch of pictures and a few words over 3 pages, we've managed to fit in the characters and their worldviews into the pages. It's really cool.
Yeah, I really loved it too. I'm really loving these bonus bits. I'm excited to continue to see them. That's the end of the content, though.
Yes, and so now we should move on to talking about our discussion question from last week, which was discuss the symbolism of something in the awakening ritual and how it related to the others/practitioners in the ceremony.
Yes, and we got a few answers. We got a lot of general discussion and a few people talking about these ingredients. I think we only got one person who made a solid bet on which ingredient matched to which element, which we'll get to in a second. But the first answer I want to pull out was by Weir White, who basically ran through a lot of the ingredients in the awakening ritual and based on their experiences with kind of New Age witchcraft mythology, talked about some of the symbolism that was in there, which I found really interesting. There's a lot, so I'm not going to sum it up here. You can just go and read the comment, but there's a lot of really interesting ideas and concepts in there.
Yeah, it's like a really like long and thorough post. It's definitely worth checking out. We don't have the time to summarize it here, but
summarizing it would do it a disservice.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It clued me into a lot of like interpretations of these ingredients that I was unaware of.
Same as. We got a response by Sarah Penguin, who did put forward explanations for why which things relate to which elements. Sarah put oil as fire and quartz as earth, or crystal as earth, which I think we both kind of were thinking of. The key to me that sold this was Sarah talking about the idea of myrrh as water, because myrrh comes from the myrrh tree, which in Greek mythology is a woman called Myrrha, who was turned into a tree, and Myr is like her tears. So I can kind of see that's the first good explanation I've heard for why any of these could be water. So I like it, Sarah, which then leaves Spice as air.
Yeah, I had Myr pegged as water for a bit because water is usually the element of life, and Myr was used for healing and embalming oils, like to preserve evidence of life. So, like, but like Sarah's is like a really good extra reason.
Yeah, definitely. That's it. That's the canonical answer, I think, now.
I do like how Spice is air just because smell moves on air.
I mean, basically, yeah.
The reasoning.
I think that's the weakest of them.
It's better than anything I've come up with. So yeah, like I'll take it.
Yeah. So good work, Sarah. You've solved it. Oil is fire, crystal is earth, Spice is air, and Myr is water.
Yep. Yep. Jot it down. Put it in the wiki. It's canon now.
Confirmed. We also got a discussion question response, or just a comment by Ace of Swords, and they were talking about a lot of things, a lot of different bits and pieces, which you can go and check out if you'd like to. But I want to pull out one specific part, which is rumination on Alpi the mare, as you know, she smiled at Verona and Avery, and Ace of Swords thought that perhaps this is a kind of confirmation that Verona and Avery were recognized by her for some reason. So potentially Alpi has had some interactions with Verona and Avery, giving them nightmares or something like that in the past, which is a great idea. I absolutely love it as an idea.
Yeah, that could be very fun. I guess we'll find out at some point, hopefully.
Yeah.
But that actually ends our coverage of last week's discussion question.
What about this week's discussion question, Elliot?
Yes, so this week our discussion question for everyone is, who can the Kenneteers trust? We've obviously, just gone on the camping trip with a few of them, but there's a bunch of others we know varying degrees of information about, and I'm interested to hear who people think they can trust.
Yeah, because we've obviously been speculating a lot about who the murderer is, but there's two sides to that. I think it's interesting to think, who should we rule out at this stage? Can we rule anyone out? And if so, who and why?
Yeah, totally.
So leave your answers in the comments of our discussion thread.
Yes, but before we go, we wanted to do another one of the bonus bits that we're reviving from Deep Impact. And we're going to do a monster corner. Well, actually, it's a bit of a double
Two
feature
monster corners, yeah. We've met a lot of monsters recently, a lot of new types of monsters, or interesting types of monsters. So we wanted to kind of dive into some of the thoughts and theories and evolutions behind them.
Yeah, so should we start with the mares?
Yeah.
I know that that's not the order they're in our doc, but let's start with the
You're throwing me off here today, Elliot. Yeah, so mares we touched on a little bit last week. If you've seen the painting The Nightmare, you'll know what they look like. They ride on your chest while you sleep and they give you nightmares. But Elliot, did you know that mares would also fuck with your hair? This was a piece of mythology where, as in mess your hair up.
Okay.
They give you
but what? I get what you mean, but I'm confused.
Yeah, they would give you super bad bed hair, basically. Or the theory was they'd give you what was known as mare locks, which are really messed up matted hair, which is possibly an explanation for a condition known as the Polish plait, which is horribly matted hair that was common in Poland when mares were kind of commonly thought of. Which is just interesting, just a weird additional thing that they maybe did is give you nightmares and also bad hair.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't aware of the link between the two, but I think I do think Alpi's hair came up a few times in her description in 1.2. So yeah,
makes sense.
I pulled out some more interesting bits I found from their mythology. They ride trees sometimes as well.
Yes, as in this is an evolution, I think, of the Marelock thing as well. The trees with really gnarled and messed up branches was what happened when they rode on trees. It would mess up their branches as well.
But to sort of zoom in, you already mentioned the Polish plates. To focus in on the sort of Polish interpretation of mares, because obviously it changes throughout different cultures and times.
Yeah.
There was some bits that stood out to me in the Polish interpretation. So, for instance, some signs that someone could be a mare include being the seventh daughter, having your own name pronounced in the wrong way while you were being baptized, having multicolored eyes, or having a unibrow.
This is just like things that you want to bully somebody over. It means they're a mare. Except being the seventh daughter, I guess that would be a weird one.
One of the other ones is if you mispronounce things during a prayer, that's probably a sign that you are a mare.
Yeah, and that's one to me that is just so ridiculous. Like, it feels very much like the Crucible, like some justification for being shit to somebody. Oh, they mispronounced prayers. They must be some kind of demon. I don't know.
Yeah. And so for this next bit, Ruben, I actually wanted to turn it into a bit of a game.
All right.
I'm gonna say something.
Yeah.
Like a thing you can do, and you've got to tell me whether it is or is not a common way to ward off a mare.
All right, I've closed my eyes. I'm not looking at the notes.
Okay, so changing your sleeping position.
I mean, that feels like it must be something.
It is.
Like,
yes, correct.
Okay. Start with
okay, how about sleeping with a leather or like a scythe?
I feel like you've made that one up.
Nope, that one's real.
Damn it. Real. Okay.
What about smearing feces on the front door of your house?
That, I don't think you would come up with that. That must be real because it's too weird.
Yes, that is real. What about drinking coffee before you go to bed?
That feels fake.
Nope, that one's real too.
Are these all real?
Yeah, they're all real. I'm just going through the list.
Oh, God.
There's another one which is taking the mare's hat. So if you take their hat, they won't mess with
you. Will you just take its hat and that protects you?
And inviting them for breakfast also makes them stop messing with you.
I love mythology.
I'd be very curious to like try and figure out the reasoning behind how all this came about. Both the sign someone could be a mare and also these, this splattering of various protection practices that range in seriousness to a fair degree. Like, would you rather smear feces on your front door or change sleeping position?
Or invite it to breakfast? Yeah. Classic.
Yeah, and so for the second half of this double feature, we're going to quickly do one. This may end up being completely pointless because I'm going to try and take a stab at what Miss is. Honestly, having now read 1.3 and 1.4, she's probably going to be a lot more interesting than just cool mythological creature Wildbow found on the internet. But yeah, I guess we'll see.
I don't know. It seems like Wildbow's things, if not completely based on a mythology, or at least inspired by it,
Yeah, there'll definitely be extra twists on this, but I was probably more convinced on this in 1.2. I should have brought it up last week, but I want to talk about hide-behinds. Which are these cryptozoological animals that they're not invisible, but you can't actually see them because they're always hiding behind things. So they popped up in like the logging camps of like the early sort of European settlement of America. So people would set up these logging camps to try and build new towns, and there were all sorts of creatures made up during this time. And one of them was the hide behind. It was basically this thing that you could hear behind you, but every time you turned around, it was quick enough that it had just gotten out of the way so you couldn't see it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you could catch glimpses of like, its arms or its legs if it wasn't moving quick enough, but you'd never see the face.
Yeah.
Which is what kind of sold me on them maybe being this. They are described as mostly looking like goats or bears.
I mean, we haven't really seen Miss's face, so maybe.
No, not in the face, in the body. They're like hairy and furry. So that's not a point in the theory's favor.
Fair.
But this does equip us with ways to potentially scare Miss off if this is what she is.
Oh yeah, what are some of the ways that you ward off? Invite it to breakfast, take its hat.
No. There's only fire scares them away. So you can make her go away with fire.
Yep. Edith versus Miss, the final showdown.
The other bit of lore I came up with came across for why they're how to get them to go away is they're very scared of alcohol. So it was suggested that you drink alcohol or even just carry alcohol on your person.
Yeah.
Like open. It has to be an open carry situation.
Right. Okay.
But basically just the smell of alcohol will make them go away, which I admit some people might read as just these American logging camps maybe having an agenda.
Trying to encourage their workers to get drunk.
I disagree. I think it's very helpful hide behind lore, and so
that's why I drink, Elliot. Definitely to get rid of hide behinds.
Oh yeah, like what the Kenneteers need to do is they need to go rob a liquor store, and then they can make Mist go
and
away.
just carry around open containers of alcohol.
Draw a diagram on the alcohol so nobody notices it. It'll be fun.
Yeah. Ah, man, people came up with some wild ideas for how to ward away evil, didn't they?
Yeah, they really did.
Yeah, I love it. This is my favorite thing about doing Pact and now about doing Pace. Sorry, not Pace. Pale. Yeah, I got it confused with something else. Is the opportunity to just dive into like weird mythology that I never would have heard about.
Yeah.
It's always fun.
But yeah, that's actually the end of today's episode.
Are you sure? We haven't even gone for 2 hours yet.
Okay, let's just sit quietly for a few minutes.
Let's just pad it out. No, thanks for joining us, folks.
I just realized our edit process cuts down long silences, so we just sat around for 5 minutes and it's going to achieve nothing.
Let's do it again. All right, now we must be over 2 hours. Anyway.
We've been sitting here for 10 minutes.
Yep. So, who can the Kenneteers trust? That's our discussion question, and you should leave your answers to it in our discussion thread, which will be linked down at the bottom of this episode, down in the bottom, a little bit further. There it is.
Yes. If you want to find out more about the Doof Network, see what else is on there aside from Power Reflections, there's some other really cool stuff. Decomposing Worm.
Yes.
Which is Matthias and Clarence's dive into, Worm.
Never heard of it.
It's really fun. I think especially us and to a degree, Matt and Scott, it's just, we like the story and we're talking about it and trying to read into it a bit. Matthias and Clarence are actually kind of professionals.
Yes.
And they're doing this formula where every second episode is actual essays analyzing Worm in
through
using
different
all these
literary analysis conventions.
Yeah, all this shit I don't really understand, but I'm excited to check out. But so that's going to be a really cool new way to sort of engage with a story I'm sure all of us have read at least one time. So go check it out.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited too. The first episode has just come out, so check it out. Also, why don't you check out our Twitter? Elliot does live reads there every few days, live reading the new chapters.
Yeah, it's pretty much about 48 hours after the chapter comes out is when I do the live read. And they do have Pact spoilers, so don't come if you haven't read Pact or, if you care about that. Because I can't filter that stuff out live.
Yeah. If you want to find that, you can go to @MediaMD Podcast on Twitter.
Yes, and, Doof, which, encompasses both Decomposing Worm and that Twitter, and even this show.
Whoa.
It's completely funded by patrons. We wouldn't be around without our patrons in this form.
Nope.
So if you could head to patreon.com/doofmedia and throw some money our way that you can afford to, it helps make these podcasts happen.
Yeah. And while you're just throwing money around, God, wasteful. No, it's not. We need it. While you're on Patreon, though, head on over to Wildbow's Patreon, which is patreon.com/Wildbow. Because Wildbow is a patron-supported author. He can only write these cool stories because people give him money to do it. So be one of those people and give him some money.
Yeah, and you've just listened to 2 hours of some guys talking about the story. You're clearly somewhat invested. So if you can afford to give some money to the guy who actually made this story possible, please do.
Please do. Yeah. And that's it.
Yeah.
Next time, we'll be talking about the next arc, which is going to be called what? We haven't even, all of Wildbow's stories have arc themes, arc title themes, right? Do we know what do you think the theme of this is going to be?
Well, so we've got Lost for Words, and then
Blood Run
Cold.
Yeah.
So it's I don't know what the technical term is, but those are sayings, right? I'm lost for words, or my blood's run cold.
Especially sayings that happen when you're in horrifying situations.
Yeah. Oh, but I'm sure it's going to be fine. I don't think this is the end of Arc 1. I'm sure we've got a bit more to go, but I'm sure we'll be back for more Lost for Words next week.
Yeah. Ooh, all right. Okay, cool.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Strong sign off.